Hey everybody, welcome back to my layout. This will be a layout update video for January 2020. So let's take a look at what's new on the layout. So over here at Banff, like I was talking about last month on the layout update, first thing I did was basically glue down this whole platform here. So it runs the length from this end all the way down to almost off camera there. And I just used polyurethane glue and a whole bunch of bolts and nuts to hold it down. So that's all secured to the layout now and ready to be scenicked around. So in addition to get that platform down and glued and secured in its final location, the next step is to put the edging on the, I guess it'd be the main line side of it. So this side of the platform here, you can kind of see it. On the real thing, they've got old ties is kind of what separates the ballast from the pavement of the pavement or asphalt, I guess, whatever they used. So I started weathering scenic ties and getting those ready to put in there because I'm going to do it just like the real thing. I'm using Osborne Models scenic wooden rail ties, they're laser cut, and I'm just weathering those, and then I need a lot of them, over 160 to do the whole length of this thing. This view illustrates it a little bit better, but you can see there the tie in between the station platform and the ties of the flex track. I've got a prototype photo that illustrates it pretty good here. We'll just zoom in and take a quick look. So you can see clearly there's a row of old, really rotten ties that at this point in time, this is quite later on, but looks like they've painted right over the ties in places. So it'll really blend in with that asphalt color and the weathering of the platform when I get to that. So that's what it'll look like on mine. I've got these kind of gray weathered scenic ties placed in there and just going to go along the whole length of it. So the ties that I'm using for scenic stuff like that are these Osborne model kits, and they're just laser cut. That's what they look like right out of the package. So this is what they come like. They've got kind of little raised cuts in them basically to simulate spikes. They've also got holes drilled, so what I do is I cut those off with a hobby knife and just make them flat. Then I stain them with a kind of a grayish brown stain, and then they end up looking like this pile down here. Zoom in and take a look. So that's what the weathered ones end up looking like. They're not 100% perfect. I'm going to go and do a few more colors too. I think it'd be good to do more of a darker color as well, to kind of simulate maybe some of the ones that the creosote isn't so faded on and kind of mix it up a bit. But the variety that comes in the wood, like even the top and the bottom of the ties, really gives a lot of variety and makes them look kind of old and weathered. So I'm going to finish staining a whole bunch more of those, and then I'll be installing those on the platform. So that was one major project I worked on over the holidays. The other project I was working on over the past month is down here at the far east end of Banff. So let's go take a look at that. So I finished scratch building this structure. This is the first structure I've built for the layout, and it's a pretty important one for Banff. So for many years, maybe even almost 100 years, this ice house was here at the east end of the Banff yard. And the reason they call it as an ice house, it's a really special structure, purpose built for the old style steam era passenger cars where they didn't have mechanical air conditioning, so they actually used real blocks of ice. So this structure was put here at Banff because this is where they would store ice throughout the summer, and they could load it into the passenger trains for quote-unquote air conditioning in the steam era passenger cars. So it's a really cool, unique structure. A lot of people that have been to Banff taking pictures of trains, you'll see this in the background of their photos. It was removed about 2017. It was picked up and moved because CP didn't want it anymore. They were going to demo it. So the town of Banff stepped in and had it designated a heritage building. So it's been moved closer to the railway west end of the station now. And if anybody's been there in the last 3 years or so, it's sitting up there with a fence around it. It had 2-foot thick walls with probably sawdust insulation or something like that. And the purpose of that was to keep that ice, and they'd pack it with sawdust and keep basically lake ice, big blocks of it, all summer long. There's a different view showing the front of it. So I tried something new with this build compared to stuff that I've built in the past, and I went with full printed walls and roof details. I was lucky. I had a few pictures of it myself, but I never took the broadsides like in broad daylight that you would need to do this. So then I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to try and Photoshop it. Then I actually found a perfect photo on Flickr that somebody had took years ago, broadside of this thing. So I got a perfect picture of what would be the railway west side of it. That's this side here that's in view right now. And I use Photoshop just to kind of tweak that for the other 3 walls. And it looks pretty darn good, I think. So even the vent and everything up top, the wood slats on the vent and the shingle detail and everything, that's all just printed on normal printer paper. I scaled it myself to fit the styrene structure underneath and then just simply glued it on with like a kid's glue stick. It's such an iconic building in Banff Yard that I really wanted to get this thing right. A little bit of tweaks yet to go. Probably going to do a little bit of painting on the corners just to kind of cover up the white styrene that's showing in a few places. But other than that, it looks, I'm pretty happy with it. It has this beam sticking out of the top, and that was part of the apparatus to get the ice blocks out. So I used one of those Osborne scenic ties, same one we were just looking at in the pile there. And I just pared it down just to make it look like kind of like a wooden 6x6 or something. So we'll take it over to the workbench and we'll show you the prototype pictures I worked off of for this. Over at the work desk here, you can see more of those scenic ties that I've been working on. All I do is I've got a kind of a wash here of brownish gray, and I just simply throw a whole bunch of those ones in there that I've clipped the spikes off of. And then I just set them to dry on these old sprue racks here. The reason I do that is if you leave them flat with that much paint on them, they basically stick to whatever they're laying on. And then it peels the paint and looks not good when you lift them up. So I found after I did it that way the first few times and didn't have good results, I found it was better to take the time to put them on a rack like this. And then you basically, you have 4 good sides when they're dry. So there's the prototype ice house and my version of it in HO scale. So the majority of the work for this was researching, going through old pictures, and so you could see the comparison there. It's not 100% perfect. This, the door here, so I didn't have an image of this door, and I couldn't make this photo that I have here work because it's at such an angle. So I actually used, if you've ever read Lance Mindheim's blog, he does a lot of photo printing for doing surfaces like pavement and urban buildings and stuff like that. And he has kind of a free resource thing where you can download some images that he's used. And this gray door here is actually a door off of one of his structures. I mean, his stuff is absolutely incredible. You can check his website out, but that's where I got that door from. It's pretty close. It's not 100%, but when you look at the overall picture, it's pretty darn good. So this wall here was all 100% broadside photo. So that is the detail, everything. It's got this junction box there that's on the real thing, smashed out window, and even the some of the paneling underneath there. On the other side, I used the same window over, but I just put it on, did a mirror image of it, flipped it, got rid of the junction box. So the window's in the right place as it is on the other side, but it just is reused from the right side. And then the back of it, the material that they used to make this building is pretty interesting actually. It's not real brick. It's like a 1-inch thick kind of faux brick that they used just to make it look like it's a brick building. It's a wooden underneath, but from a distance it looks like brick. So to do that, so this is basically what I do. This is just printed paper, and I size them up on Corel Draw, scale them to be the exact right size, and I actually put lines on it so that to aid me in cutting. And then I just cut them out with a hobby knife. So this is just a spare backing that I had, but you can see like it's a dead ringer. You can put those on easily, change the different things, Photoshop whatever you want. So I'm really happy with the way that turned out, and I think that's going to be the way that I end up doing a lot of my structures. If I can get the photos for it, the realism is just so good. Like, it looks so real with all that minute details that you wouldn't be able to capture, you know, if you tried to do this out of wood or painting it, it would be really hard. So here's the vent. So it's just styrene, the old styrene that I had. I actually used this, if you remember years ago, I built that coal tipple, and it kind of had that ribbed siding on it. So this is I used that styrene. This whole building is made out of that. I just flipped the ribs to the inside. And to hold these things in place, well, because it's hard to build such a tiny little thing like this. It's not big at all. Like, it's maybe a Lego brick, 1 centimeter squared. And it's kind of hard to glue tiny pieces like that. So I put Fun-Tack on the inside. Fun-Tack holds it in its final place until the glue dries. This thing was actually harder to build than the full size. just this little vent, because it's got, of course they have to have the hardest type of roof, hip roof on the top of this. I think I pulled it off. It's not bad. It's not perfect. You could probably do better 3D printing something like this rather than trying to make all these angles yourself, but I think it turned out pretty good. It's pretty square. And the roof of this is just thick cardstock. That's all it is. And then I did the shingles out of the same, using the same image for this. But I love that printed, the printed detail. You just can't, you couldn't recreate those tiny wood slats like that, you know, to 1 centimeter. And even the crack in the wood there at the bottom, like, that'd be really, really hard to do. You could do it, but it would be difficult and take you a really long time. So eventually, once I get it all finalized, I'll glue that thing on there. So a lot of paper when you do modeling like that. This kind of just shows an overview of a lot of the pictures I had. So those are the building sides there. You can see the roof sections that I was working on, and then other just pictures I took when I was there to kind of get, you know, the detail. It's quite accessible. It just has this wooden fence around it right now at Banff. So, and then other pictures I took, you know, this was several years ago, I think around 2015 maybe, when it was still sitting in its proper spot in the yard. And then this is later after 2017 when they moved it. I did have original plans. It's not exact match for the Banff Ice House, but it's a standard ice house blueprint that I found on the CPR Historical Society's website, and that's just a free image. So a lot of internet research, really. Probably 60% my own photos and 40% of stuff I found on the internet to make those paper sides for it. So you can see here quite a few attempts at getting the hip roof on top of the vent right, but once I figured out that it wasn't just perfect equilateral triangles, and then I was able to get the right angles for that. So I'll include some photos for those who are interested, just prototype photos of the ice house itself, the blueprints, some of the other information I had. They've got a few kind of printed slides that they've put on the fence around it right now that explain the history of this building. So I'll include those too. We'll just flip through them quickly. You can pause if you'd like to read them. So I'll put those pictures in here now. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the inspiration for this building and why it's so important for my layout. So last thing I'll show on it, some people might be interested with the construction of the inside. So the first thing I do is always make the cement basically the foundation for it, and then I build the styrene structure on that, and this is the inside of it. It's just nothing fancy, just styrene, just a piece in there to keep the middle of it square and not from bending. And that's it. So it's super lightweight, and then the paper actually overhangs the foundation, and that will help kind of make the seamless transition once I go and put the scenery material on there. So before we wrap this layout update video, I do have a follow-up item from last month. A lot of people asked me about this sprayer that I got. So that sprayer was to what I use to spray the ballast, and you know, it does such a good job and such a fine mist. I had a ton of people ask me where I got it. My wife picked it up for me at some hair salon place, but I did find the tag for it, so I just wanted to include that. So anybody last month if you were wondering about this sprayer and where I got it from, this is the model of it. So that'll wrap up this layout update, guys. Hopefully you had a good holiday season and New Year. Still lots of time left in the modeling season. This week it has been insanely cold here. I don't know what kind of weather you guys have been getting, but just this past Wednesday this week, when I was getting up in the morning, I took a look at the outside thermometer. We were minus 41 degrees Celsius. So for you folks who use Fahrenheit, that's minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit. It was absolutely insane. Coldest I've ever seen it here. It was something else. So lots of reasons to stay down here in the nice warm basement and do a little modeling. So as always, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.